Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today we're tackling a question that's been around forever.
Yeah.
How can you really tell the difference between someone who's truly a visionary and someone who's maybe just a really good con artist?
You know,
He's grifter or gifted.
it's a good question, and
It
sometimes
is.
it's really hard to tell.
Break down the lives of some of the most interesting and polarizing people out there today.
Absolutely. And we're here to give you guys the information so you can make up your own mind
That's it, exactly.
about these folks.
And the subject of today's deep ties is Bishop Richard John Garcia.
Okay.
We've got a whole bunch of sources about his work in the Catholic Church.
Right.
We've got obituaries, biographical articles, even a Facebook post.
Wow.
But what we really want to know is, what was he like as a person?
Yes.
Was he truly someone who was a force for good? Or was there something else going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, was there something more maybe a little calculated in
Well,
the things that he was doing?
Exactly. So to get started,
Yeah, let's start with the facts.
yeah.
Bishop Garcia, he was born in San Francisco to Mexican immigrant parents.
Yep.
And that experience of growing up in an immigrant community, seems like it really had a big impact on his work later in life.
That's a great point.
Hmm.
I noticed that throughout his career, he always seemed to have this really strong commitment to social justice, especially for the poor immigrants and people who were incarcerated.
Right.
Do you think that connection to his own upbringing could have played a part in that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about his path to becoming a bishop.
Right.
He was ordained as a priest in 1973 for the Archdiocese of San Francisco, served in different parishes,
Uh-huh.
and then he went to Rome
Wow.
to continue his studies at the Pontifical Gregorian University.
That's quite a commitment.
Yeah, that's a pretty serious commitment to
Yeah.
education and to his faith.
That's not something just anyone does.
No.
Speaking of commitment, Bishop Garcia was known for his really strong support of the Monterey Bay Community Power Proposal, which was a pretty big clean energy initiative.
Yes, it was.
It seems like to him this was more than just an environmental issue.
Oh, absolutely. He actually called it a life issue,
Wow.
directly connecting his faith to the need to take care of the environment. So that was a pretty progressive stance,
Yeah.
especially for a Catholic bishop back then.
Yeah, especially at that time.
He even went so far as to help gather almost 6,000 signatures in support of this proposal.
Wow, 6,000 signatures. That's a lot of door knocking.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
He really put himself out there for this.
He did.
Do we know what kind of impact this initiative ended up having?
Well, yeah, it actually ended up saving the diocese millions of dollars
Wow.
and helped make them look like a leader in doing things in a sustainable way.
So it had a real positive impact.
It definitely had a real and positive impact, yes.
Okay, so we've got this picture starting to emerge of someone who was really dedicated to his faith and to these social justice causes. But we also have this interesting little tidbit
Oh, yeah.
from Bishop Wigan's homily.
Okay.
Apparently, Bishop Garcia was, like, obsessed with artichokes.
Really?
He would even bring them as gifts when he would visit Sacramento.
That's funny.
It's such a funny little detail.
Yeah.
It really makes him seem more human, you know?
It humanizes him.
It does.
It's easy to forget that these people that we're talking about,
Right.
they're real people
Yeah.
with their own little quirks and passions.
It makes you wonder what it would have been like to just sit down and have a conversation with him.
Yeah, I know.
Like, do you think that kind of down-to-earth nature helped him connect with people?
I think it's certainly possible, especially, remember he was working with communities that were often ignored and marginalized.
Right.
So that ability to connect with people on a personal level,
Yeah.
to show them that he understood their struggles,
Yeah.
I think that could have been a big help.
So we're starting to see a more complex picture of Bishop Garcia.
Right?
This man who was dedicated to his faith, committed to social justice, maybe even a bit of a foodie with his love for artichokes.
A little bit, yeah.
But how does this all fit into that question of grifter or gifted?
Right.
Could all this dedication have been some kind of calculated move?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's easy to look at all the things that he accomplished and just assume that he had good intentions.
Yeah.
But we do have to think about the possibility that those actions, even the ones that seemed really selfless,
Right.
could have been driven by something totally different.
And that's what makes this so interesting.
Yeah.
We really have to look at the evidence.
Yeah, look at all of it.
And ask ourselves, was Bishop Garcia a true visionary who used his position to make a real difference?
Yes.
Or was he a really smart operator who carefully built up his image
Right.
to gain more power and influence?
Exactly. And that's the kind of thinking that we want to encourage in our listeners. Don't just take our word for it.
Exactly.
Look at the information yourself, weigh the evidence, and then you decide what you think.
That's right. Come to your own conclusions.
Yes.
It's interesting that you bring up this idea of image. I mean, we are talking about someone who was a high-ranking official in the Catholic Church.
Yes.
There's a certain level of authority that just comes with that position.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We have to remember the context that he was working in.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church. It's a very hierarchical institution.
Right.
It's got a long history of having power and influence.
Of course.
So it's worth thinking about, did Bishop Garcia use that power to get what he wanted?
So if we're playing devil's advocate here for a minute,
Yeah.
could someone argue that his support for all of these different social justice causes, was that maybe a way for him to strengthen his position within the church?
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
And it might not have just been about power in the church either.
What do you mean?
Well, remember, we were talking about someone who was super involved in his community.
Right.
He was talking to politicians, business leaders, everyday people.
Right.
All those connections, that social capital,
Okay.
can be really valuable.
True. But we can't forget that Bishop Garcia died from complications from Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
And he was only 71 years old.
Yeah, that's young.
It's a really sad end to a life that, by all accounts, was dedicated to helping others.
It is. It's a really sad reminder that we're all human.
Yeah.
And it also makes things more complicated,
Right.
It's hard to imagine this guy battling a serious illness and at the same time trying to climb the ladder of power.
It's hard to picture.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned that even while he was sick,
Uh-huh.
Bishop Garcia, he kept meeting with people and offering comfort to others.
Wow.
But even as he was facing his own mortality,
Yeah.
he was still focused on serving his community.
That really says a lot about him. It makes you think he was truly compassionate and selfless.
Yeah.
But again, we got to be careful
Right.
about jumping to conclusions.
Yeah.
Just because we hear a few nice stories.
Of course.
It could be that he was doing this to protect his image.
Right.
As he was getting sicker,
Yeah.
trying to make sure he left behind a good legacy.
I see what you mean. We have to look at everything.
Yes.
The good, the bad, the inspiring parts, and the parts that make you question things.
That's right.
And that takes us back to our main question.
Okay.
Grifter or gifted?
Yeah. What do you think?
Honestly, it's tough.
It is.
There's no easy answer here.
I agree.
We've seen things that point in both directions.
Yeah.
This was a man who achieved great things.
Yes.
He fought for social justice. He seemed to really care about his community.
Yes.
But at the same time, we have to consider that maybe he had other motives.
Right.
Maybe he was being strategic with his power and his influence.
It's possible.
So what do our listeners take away from all of this? How should they approach this question of grifter or gifted when they're thinking about Bishop Garcia?
I think the most important thing is don't make a quick decision.
Yeah.
Don't just look at the headlines or what people say on TV.
Right.
Dig a little deeper. Look at the context.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what was he really trying to do?
Right.
Why did he take these actions? And in the end, you decide for yourself what you believe.
I think that's really great advice.
Yeah.
We're not here to tell you what to think.
No.
We're just trying to give you the information you need and the tools to think critically.
That's it.
And come to your own conclusions.
Right. And remember, this isn't just about Bishop Garcia.
Yeah.
These are questions we should be asking about all our leaders.
Yeah.
All the people who have power.
Right.
Are they doing things for themselves or for something bigger?
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Bishop Garcia's life and his career.
We have.
We've seen the good, the bad, the complicated stuff.
All the in-between.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing.
Oh, and what's that?
His dedication to education.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, he didn't just study in Rome. He also taught at a bunch of different seminaries.
Yes.
He really seemed to believe in the power of knowledge.
He did.
And learning. It makes me wonder if that focus on education played into all those things he did later on.
Yeah.
Do you think he believed in empowering people by giving them knowledge?
That's a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
Think about it. His support for that clean energy thing wasn't just him signing a piece of paper.
Right.
It was about him teaching people about the issue, getting them excited about it.
Right.
It seems like he understood that if you want to make real change, you got to start with helping people understand.
That's a great point. It adds a whole other layer to that grifter or gifted question.
Yeah.
If he was really all about empowering other people, wouldn't that make him more of a gifted?
It seems like it, right?
Yeah.
But even education can be tricky. Well, it can be used to set people free and give them power,
Right.
but it can also be used to control them and get them to do what you want.
I see what you mean.
Like, think about propaganda, or even just the way certain ideas get taught over and over again.
So how do we square that with what we know about Bishop Garcia?
Yeah, how do we know if his focus on education was a good thing, or if he was using it for his own benefit?
Right.
Well, that's where we all have to think critically.
Right.
We have to look beyond what's on the surface and really examine how he used education.
Okay.
Did he encourage people to think for themselves and have open discussions?
Hmm.
Or was he pushing a specific agenda?
That's something to consider. I think that's a really important takeaway for our listeners.
I agree.
Don't just take things at face value.
Right.
Question everything. Dig a little deeper, and most importantly, decide what you believe.
Exactly. The world is full of people who are hard to figure out.
It is.
People who don't fit neatly into one category or another.
Yeah.
It's our job to look at the information, think it through, and come to our own conclusions.
Well said. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the life and work of Bishop Richard John Garcia.
I think so.
We've covered a lot today. We looked at his dedication to social justice, his work on environmental issues, his love for artichokes,
Oh, yeah, those artichokes.
and his belief in the power of education.
And we really grappled with that big question, grifter or gifted.
We did.
Hopefully we've given you enough to start forming your own opinion.
Remember, there are no easy answers,
Yep.
but that's what makes these conversations so interesting.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep looking for the truth.
Who knows? Maybe you'll find something that changes your whole perspective.
Until next time, keep diving deep.